Good afternoon, this is Mr. McGee, and welcome to my first tutorial on how to make a table specifically for the IB Biology internal assessment, which is due coming up here in March. First up, I've already entered all my data, and I'm assuming you know how to enter numbers on Microsoft Excel. And I've already input some titles here, but I am going to move this around just a tad bit, so just assuming you know what to do there, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to move this a little closer so I can see. And you can do that by coming up here to view and using one of these tools, or by holding control and moving your mouse wheel. That'll make this easier to see everything. Let's go ahead and put it there so that everybody is more comfortable at hand. And what we're going to do now is show you that you can move these top columns to get them to fit. Now, I think that looks okay. We can probably let this exist just like this, but I'm going to move this out here a little bit more so that we can see this comfortably. I am now going to center my data. You just highlight everything and come here back to home page, and I think it looks nice just like that. So I'm going to try at this time to clean it up a little bit by adding some little line spacers in there and change the title. First of all, we have our independent variable, and you can see this is time exposed to microwaves per minute. Now, sometimes we write uncertainties in units with little brackets like this in parentheses, but sometimes we can just put a little slash, and then we just put our unit minus to the 1 power, which basically refers to per minute of unit. You can do it either way, and I wanted to kind of put it like there. Now, in the case of this, time exposed to microwaves, I don't really necessarily need to worry about uncertainty here because it's only as fast as I can stop a microwave oven. So, plus a microwave oven timer is going to go off at a pretty certain time. So, in some cases, you as a scientist have to determine, is it kind of redundant for me in this case to put a uncertainty in? I think in this case, you don't need to put an uncertainty in here. It's pretty redundant. But in this case, CO2 concentration of the Z maize, which is corn seeds, by the way, the concentration of these after 60 minutes of germination, well, my tool that I'm using to measure CO2 concentration, it has a little uncertainty. And even though it's printed on the label that it's about plus or minus 1 part per million, it fluctuated enough that we are comfortable saying it's probably a little more, plus or minus about 5 part per million. You can decide this if you think it is worse than what the indicated uncertainty is on the tool. You be the scientist and decide that. But again, in this case, it's redundant for us to put the uncertainty. I was just trying to show you another way to do it. Let's go ahead and center that title because it'd be nice to have it centered over it just like that. But then we run into the problem of CO2 concentration. It doesn't fit very well over what appears to be my trials. In fact, that's another thing. How do I add my trials to this? And there's actually a couple ways to do this. I'm going to go here to Insert, and let's do Insert Row. And you can see I get a box above it. Now this ain't going to work for me like this, so what I'm going to do is highlight, or I guess technically this entire title is in this one box here. I'm going to highlight this entire title that I have and hit Control C for copy, and I'm going to hit Control V and paste it up there, and then just kind of, whoops, clear out that box. Now I can add my trials. I'm going to write trial 1, go over here to trial 2, trial 3, trial 4, and trial 5. And just to make it nice, we're going to go ahead and center those just like that. But I still am having a problem with my title. Now I could go up here and simply just resize it, but I don't want to do that because that's just going to make it look bad. It should at least be as large, if not larger, than your data itself. So I got to find a way to get it to fit in there. And one thing I can do to make sure it only fits in these cells, because if you noticed, these cells here are kind of by themselves. It's this cell that's kind of overlapping them. In order to make them fit in those cells and to merge those 5 cells together, I'm going to highlight those, come here to Merge and Center. Now I merged and centered it, but notice it doesn't quite fit still again. So there's a couple different ways to fix this, but one thing I can do is just simply highlight these columns. I can do all of it like this, or I can just go like this Go up here to Format, Column Width. I'm going to try to space this out more so it fits. Let's go ahead and do a column width of 5. That is not going to work. It's too small. So I'm going to go back up here to Format, Column Width, and you can see I can do other things as well. Column width, let's do 10 and see if that works. And I'm still not going to fit. Go back here to column width and let's do 13. And maybe just a tad undersized. Let's do one more. Let's do column width of 14. And it looks like that is going to be big enough to fit them all in there. Okay, I'm going to zoom out by holding Control, and that way I still retain the ability to get everything in there. Now, I would kind of like to get this a little bit more over there, but again, not a whole lot of ways or ways around that or things I can do about it. One thing you could do, what if I wanted to take advantage of that cell up there just like that? Now, I could do that by merging these two together and forcing it to center by going up here to Merge and Center. Now, notice it merged them and it centered it, but I want it to fit in the middle there. In order to do that, I come up here to the tool that let me center it in the first place, but I come up here to this part which makes it go high or low. And there we go. That is how you get it to fit right in the center just like that. But I'm still having a problem because I need my eye to draw to the data appropriately. Let's go ahead and put titles in there, or I'm sorry, let's go ahead and put brackets. I'm going to show you next to come over here to Font, and you'll see this little box. This here is where you'll make all your borders, and you can see all the different options for a border. You can do this any way you like as long as it's presentable and it draws your eye to the data, because remember, presentation, or I should say communication, is a major aspect of your IB internal assessment grade. Highlight these, and I'm going to put a box around them and border around each one of them just like that. I'm going to highlight this top one and just put a border up there around that, because that is now one giant cell, and this is one giant cell because I merged it together. Put a border around that, and that draws my eyes to those areas. Now, what a lot of people like to do, and you can do this if you want as well, some people just go and highlight all the data and they put a big box around each cell just like that. You can do that if you wish to. I personally don't like to do that. What I like to do is I like to highlight each column of data, and I like to put its box around it. To do that, you highlight it, and then you just hold Control. Highlight a column, and then hit Control, and then highlight all the columns of data you want to put a border around. Come back here. And let's go ahead and just add an outside border instead of that all border for each cell. And there you go. I personally like it this way, but you're not required to do it this way for that. I mean, because it's just a matter of how you want it to be presented. As long as it's good and presentable, that's fine. Let's go ahead and add something else to draw our eyes to the titles up here. And I am going to recommend you add a color to these two. Go over here to background color. I would stay away from using colors at all, because when you print these out, they're probably going to come out as black and white. So unless you plan on using a color printer and you want to pay for the cost of ink, you go for it. But I would recommend just sticking with the black or white shades. Let's go ahead and add a shade to those. Notice how it draws my eyes to those right there, just like that. Now for trials, I'm going to go ahead and add a shade just like that as well, but I want to distinguish this. You can do this again any way you wish, but I like to add a little italics just like that to it. And that way they look a little bit different. You could also consider to your titles up here with units and uncertainties, just bolding them or something, and that draws your eyes to it. So again, it's all a matter of the aspect of communication, how you present your results. That is something I cannot teach you. You have to learn on your own. To double check, all of our raw data has the same number of decimal places, and everything looks good. To double check, my eyes are drawn. It has a unit with necessary uncertainties. This independent variable is time exposed to microwaves per minute, and I don't need an uncertainty like I said. All of these boxes here are 5 trials representing the concentration of CO2 from corn seeds after 60 minutes of germination, plus or minus 5 parts per million. A couple things I could touch up on this. That 2 should be a subscript. Highlight it, come up here to font, and then you just go here to subscript. And that'll fix that and make that look much more professional. Also, go over here to ZMaze, and let's put that into italics, because when you make a species name, it's better to italicize it. One other thing. When we're talking species, remember how the second word, the species name, is actually lowercased. Let's go ahead and fix that as well. And there we go. So looks like everything is good. That is pretty much a complete table with our raw data. What we want to do at this time is let's look at some processing. Where would I add my mean and my standard deviation? Typically, you want to add it after the trials in a continuing fashion. In this case, my mean would go over here and my standard deviation would go next to it. Now notice, for some reason, it just added the background color. That works completely fine. Let's go ahead and add those cells there so that they are actually filled in just like that. Now, because these are on their own, I don't need any heading or anything like that above it. These are just kind of by themselves, and I want to get rid of that italics there. It looks like it was trying to carry that italics over. I'm using Control-I, by the way, for italics. Control-U will actually underline it, as you can see I'm doing right there, but you don't need to do that unless it's necessary. To calculate the mean, we could do this one of two ways. I could click on a cell, and I could go over here to my functions box, and I could just find my average button, but I don't need to do that. Because it's so commonly used, I'm just going to do it this way. Click on my raw data and highlight it. We do not highlight our independent variable. That's not our raw data. That's just a column of numbers we use to get our data. So highlight it and then go one box over to your mean. Now, because mean is so commonly used, Excel was nice enough to leave us a little space up here in AutoSum with the average. Boom. And it automatically calculates it. Unfortunately, for standard deviation, it's not that easy. It's not as commonly used by the general public. They were not nice enough to put us a standard deviation key up there. So what we're going to have to do is do it the way I mentioned before. Click on any cell you want this to calculate, and then go over here to the Functions tool. Now, under Category, you may have to, if this is your first time, go under All or Statistical to find this. But since I commonly use standard deviation, STDev, I'm going to click on it, and it's going to ask me to highlight data. I'm only going to need this first one, column number 1. Don't click on anything. Let it be flickered and highlighting, and you're just going to highlight that first row of data. Be careful not to highlight your mean, and that's the mistake a lot of students make, is they highlight this thinking that that's part of their data, and it's not. This is processed data. So just highlight your raw data of your 5 trials, or whatever trials you have, and click OK. That's our standard deviation. Now watch me do it again. Standard deviation. I'm going to highlight my trials, and I'll do it one more time here. Now we could keep on doing this, but as you can see, this is going to get really annoying really fast. The next thing that makes this easier is we could actually copy any of these cells and paste them. These are actually equations with the little green lines. These here are actually just raw numbers. When I click on them, you can see nothing happens except it goes between the numbers. But when I go to what is actually an equation giving us an imaginary number in front of it, if I click on it, the equation suddenly comes to life. It's kind of like, I guess, a vampire. He looks real, but when you shine a flashlight over him, he suddenly disappears. Or I guess that's like a ghost or something. I'm not sure. Okay, and you hit escape. That'll take you back. But these are actually equations. What we want to do is copy these equations, and it'll automatically compute the cells in the row that it belongs to or the column it belongs to. Go to Control-C and copy it, and you hit Control-V to paste it. Control-V, Control-V. You could do that all the way down, but another thing Excel lets you do is just highlight an entire region and hit Control-V, and it'll paste them all in there. So as you can see, Excel is extremely handy when it comes to doing this. Don't forget to save your work. Control-S will save your work periodically so you don't lose it. Double check. Looks like I forgot to put little column boxes around here, so I'm going to go back over here and add a column box. And I'm going to zoom out, double check my work, I think this looks really presentable. Although, you know, looking at it now, I don't think I want this in there, so I'm going to actually, let's see if I can unmerge that. I'm going to copy this and paste that down there, delete that, and I want my old color back of the white color. I'm just going to go up here and hit no fill, or white, it doesn't matter. I think this looks better, and this is probably good. I can now copy this and paste it, and I'll show you how to do that by just pretty much copying my data like this. Wait a second, I forgot something. We have to center this data here. And don't forget your process data, in this case mean and standard deviation. You want one more decimal point than what your raw value has. So my raw value is rounded to the nearest whole number, no decimal points. My process data should have one more decimal point, just like that. Alrighty, to copy it and paste it into a word processor, highlight what you want, hit Control-C for copy, and let's open a word processor that I already have opened. When you paste a table, it's a good idea to right-click and notice these paste options. I would highly recommend that you consider using this next one, which has the mountain picture, which is called picture pasting. I would recommend you use this one because when you paste it as a picture, watch what happens. It allows you to scale it. On the other hand, if you paste it with, say, keep source formatting, or let's say you use keep line and source formatting, sometimes, I'm not sure if it's going to work in this case, but if I want to rescale it, notice it's kind of being a hassle there. Sometimes if you want to rescale it or move it around, it's an absolute nightmare. And sometimes when you try to size it or something, it doesn't let you do it. And the problem is a lot of people will just print their paper like this, and I'm sorry, it doesn't count for presentation. So again, I would paste it as a picture, and now you can size it as you want to. You can rotate the picture if you want to, however you want it to fit. But you can also move it around, and to do that, you go up here to Format, and you go up here to Wrap Text, and I just go in front of text. And now I can move this picture anywhere I want to. And I'm guessing this anchor tool lets me mount it down. I'm not sure what that means. Let's do this one more time with another set of data. This set of data, we are looking at an osmosis lab where we dissolved dissolved salt in water solutions. These represent the percent solution of salt that is in there. And first of all, I'm going to have to make sure these are all consistent decimal points by going up here to number. And it looks like my data is kind of crazy, probably because some of the students, this student here probably thought they could add all kinds of decimal points, and this student here didn't put 2 decimal points behind it. What we're going to do is highlight our raw data, although I could probably do this later, and you just change the number of decimal points by moving it around. Originally, I wanted these to be 2 decimal points, and so notice that 11 we saw earlier, well, we're just going to keep it as 11.00. Even though it's just 11, this is still showing a measurement of a precision behind it, so we're going to leave it there. Also, let's make sure we center all of our stuff just to make it look nice. And notice over here, these are actually representing a trial. What we're going to do, let me go ahead here and put trial number, and we'll center that right above in that box there. What we need to do now is figure out a way to get this title above our section. And how do I do that? If these are all different cells, just like I said before. Go up here to merge and center, and merge it and center it. I don't need to do anything else because it fits, other than maybe just kind of get this little superscript in there by highlighting it and coming here to font and superscripting it. Okay, next thing I need to do is look at adding some borders. So I'm going to do it as before. Go over here to borders, and let's go ahead and add a border here and add a border to that box. Let's go ahead and add column borders in this direction here, just like this. And just like before, don't just add borders like this, otherwise it'll look kind of like this. Unless this is what you wanted. This is completely acceptable too. You know what, we'll leave it like this for now just so you can kind of get the idea. Let's go ahead and add a little shaded top section to it just like that. And what the heck, let's just kind of add these to our trials right there. So that looks a lot better. Notice this is representing the percent of salt dissolved in 100 milliliters of water. And that is basically the percent solution, essentially. But what do all these numbers mean? After all, this is my independent variable, but that means these trials are measuring our dependent variables, or all of these numbers. Now, remember our last graph, everything was kind of, our trials were up on the column or the horizontal axis, but our trials instead are on the vertical axis on this one. Well, that means I got to have a title over here, and I need to get something in there. So I'm just going to right-click and put Insert Column. And now I can put anything in here I want to. Let's go ahead here and put what this is, the percent change in mass of potato core. Okay, and we do Alt plus 0177 gives you that plus and minus symbol there. I believe from what we were looking at, it had an uncertainty of 0.01 grams. And notice it just doesn't fit as well, again, as we wanted it to. And we certainly don't want to have a table that looks like this. We can do better. To do that, I'm just going to highlight this entire thing here, this entire column, and hit Merge and Center. And I can bring it up to the center. And let's see if I can squeeze this in and get it to fit. Clearly, it does not want to fit in there. So what I'm going to do at this time, to get it all to fit and to stack it on top of each other, so I'm going to go up here to Wrap in Text. Click on it, and it fits very beautifully. Probably put cores in there just like that. All right, looking at my table, it looks like I've got my independent variables labeled. It looks like I have all my dependent variables and their trials labeled. Now it looks like it's done. I just need my standard deviation and my mean. By the way, these trials, because they're kind of flush like this, these do not have to be centered. In fact, none of it has to be centered. It just looks nice, but you can center it if you want to. Let's do our mean and standard deviation. And because it's in the direction of our trials, that means it's going to go in this direction here. There we go. Let's go ahead and put a box around those and gray them in the back. And to calculate the mean, once again, highlight your raw data, but instead of going this way like we did last time, we go down this way. Okay, so highlight your raw data and go down, go here to auto sum and average. Now to do standard deviation again, click on the cell you want the calculation, go to functions and standard deviation. And I'm going to need access to my entire column here. And remember, only the raw data. Do not get the independent variable or the mean. Okay, same thing. Let's go over here to calculate the standard deviation. And I can do this all manually, one at a time, or again, Control C to copy it and Control V to paste it. Looks like here I need to clean this up. Make sure these have one more decimal point than these, which means I need 3 decimal points. And I'm going to go ahead and center those. Alrighty. I'm going to make sure that these have a border to them. And wait a minute, since these all have their own cell border, I should probably go back here to all borders and input a border. Okay, I'm going to zoom out and take a look and see if it makes sense. Looks to me, at this time, I guess I'm doing this talking live on the microphone, so I could miss something, but looks good. I think we'll stop right here, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Please feel free to email me or comment on Facebook, or I'm sorry, on YouTube. And I just say, make sure when you do this, you do it to your own abilities and that you just make it presentable. It does not necessarily have to look like this table. Thank you very much.